When I was a young child, my family lived near Walden Pond in Lexington, Massachusetts. Our home was next to a farm with apple trees, corn, and tomatoes, and a row of stacked beehives. My father was a chemical engineer. He watched a television commercial that said, "Take your sinuses to Arizona." He had hay fever, and so he did. He secured a job at a semiconductor plant in Phoenix. We drove west in our pea-green Studebaker, staying overnight along the way at Motel 6s and eating Denny's and Sambo's. We settled in Scottsdale, living in a motel until our tract house was built. My father's new job at Motorola was to grow, slice, and etch silicon wafers for transistors and microprocessors. My mother wrote a column about our school and neighborhood, science fair winners and Little League results for the Scottsdale Daily Progress. My friends and I often reminisce about our childhoods when things were different. It was a far more innocent world and a safer one. My sister, brother, and I, along with the rest of the kids on our block, played on the street until twilight when our mothers called us in for dinner. We played ring and run, tag, and the boys chased girls. TV dinners, fried chicken, mashed potatoes with a pat of butter, apple cobbler, each isolated in its own compartment, set on folding trays. We watched Bonanza, Wonderful World of Disney, and The Man from UNCLE. We were Cub Scouts and brownies. We had barbecues, built go-karts, made cakes in my sister's easy-bake oven, and rode inner tubes down the Salt and Verde rivers. But I'm not sure if the wistful recollections of those times are justified. The news in our neighborhood traveled by way of our mother's hushed voices. Charles Manson and 50% off sales and fad diets were favorite topics on the sidewalk, at Tupperware parties and mahjong games, and in the beauty shop where my mother got her hair frosted. They whispered when a 10-year-old child who lived on our block hanged himself. Then a girl who lived 2 doors down was killed in a car accident. The driver, an older boy, was high on drugs. The proximity to Mexico meant that drugs were abundant and cheap. Geography, however, probably didn't make a lot of difference. A smorgasbord of previously unknown or unavailable drugs flooded our school and our neighborhood, as they have flooded America since the mid-1960s. Marijuana was the most prevalent. Kids hung out by the bike rack after school selling joints for 50 cents and ounce bags for $10. They offered hits of their joints in the bathroom and while walking to and from our school. One of my friends sought it out and after smoking it, told a group of us about it. He said that he asked a boy we all knew was a stoner for marijuana and smoked the joint in the backyard of his parents' house, coughed a lot, felt nothing, then went inside and ate a box of Chips Ahoy cookies. He began smoking almost every day. A year or so later, a boy on our block asked if I wanted to smoke a joint. It was 1968, and I was a high school freshman. It didn't do much for me, but neither did it cause me to hallucinate or try to fly off the roof of our house like Art Linkletter's daughter supposedly did when she tried LSD. That is, it seemed harmless, and so I didn't think twice about trying it again when I walked into another boy's house and his older brother passed me a glowing roach held by an alligator clip. Of course, it wasn't articulated, but pot, with its outlaw cachet, was a passkey into a loosely defined social circle. To be inside was a relief after my lonely geekiness in junior high. I laughed easier and felt funnier with a stoned, that is, less disconcerting, audience. Here was a palliative for raging insecurity. I experienced everything, music, nature, in a heightened, far more intense way, and was less shy around girls, a benefit that cannot be overstated for a boy of 14 or 15. The world seemed at once obscured and more vivid. But even these probably weren't the main reasons why I continued smoking. On top of the continuous peer pressure and the high, plus the sense of rebellion in a lighted joint, plus the camaraderie, and besides the way that pot helped assuage my awkwardness and insecurity, besides all this, marijuana helped me feel something when I felt almost nothing, helped me block out feelings when I felt too much. In precisely the way that pot made things both blurrier and more vibrant, it allowed me to feel more and to feel less. Nowadays, people of my age often say that drugs were different then, less potent pot and purer psychedelics. This is true. Tests of marijuana have shown that there is twice as much THC, the active ingredient, in the average joint or pipeful today than in the weed of a decade ago, which itself was stronger than in the 1960s and 70s. There are frequent reports that psychedelics and ecstasy are laced with or even substituted by meth and other drugs or impurities, though back then we heard of kids snorting Drano in place of cocaine. One thing is undeniably different. A body of research has unequivocally shown a wide range of dangerous physical and psychological effects of drugs, including marijuana. We thought they were safe. They weren't. I know that some people look back on what they consider the good old days of harmless drug use. They survived intact, but many people did not. There were accidents, suicides, and overdoses. I still run into a shocking number of drug casualties from the 1960s and 70s who wandered the streets, some of them homeless. Some rant about conspiracies. Apparently it's a trait common in drug addicts and alcoholics. Whenever his liquor began to work, he almost always went for the government, said Huck Finn about his drunkard father. And so through Nick's childhood, ever since he was 7 or 8, I talked to him about drugs. We spoke about them early and often in ways prescribed by the Partnership for a Drug-Free America. I told him about people who were harmed or killed. I told him about my mistakes. I watched for the early warning signs of teenage alcoholism and drug abuse. Number 15 on one organization's list, is your child suddenly volunteering to clean up after cocktail parties but forgetting his other chores? When I was a child, my parents implored me to stay away from drugs. I dismissed them because they didn't know what they were talking about. They were and still are teetotalers. I, however, knew about drugs from first-hand experience, so when I warned Nick, I thought I might have some credibility. Many drug counselors tell parents of my generation to lie to our children about our past drug use. It's the same reason that it may backfire when famous athletes show up to school assemblies or on television and tell kids, "Man, don't do this shit. I almost died." Yet, there they stand, diamonds, gold, multi-million-dollar salaries, and cereal box fame. The words, "I barely survived." The message, "I survived, thrived, and you can too." Kids see that their parents turned out all right in spite of the drugs. So maybe I should have lied to Nick and kept my drug use hidden, but I didn't. He knew the truth. Meanwhile, our close relationship made me feel certain that I would know if he were exposed to them. I naively believed that if Nick were to try them, he would tell me. I was wrong.